Morning everybody, happy Tuesday and welcome back to another episode of the Daily Language Learning Diary. Back to my whale blue mug today, it's my favorite one. Alright, let's jump into our daily question. So we have another question from Trilingual Lynn, who says, I'm curious on how you feel about jumping from language to language. I tend to study Chinese for a while and then become seduced into studying other languages. I always end up coming back to Chinese, but it does delay my progress. I feel like I would be B2, HSK 4 or 5 in Mandarin if I didn't stray away from Mandarin. This has made me like beginner or A1 in Korean, Tagalog, Indonesian, Spanish, and HSK 3 in Mandarin. I'm curious to know your opinion on language hopping. So I think this is a really interesting question, and I think that as the online language learning space is really expanding and more people are becoming interested in not just learning a language, but learning multiple languages, there is a side effect that I have been worried about since I first began making content, and that's one of the reasons why I always put so much emphasis on being honest and authentic and genuine with all the content that I do. So for example, whenever I make a multilingual video speaking 6 or 8 languages, it's always non-scripted and it's spontaneous because I really want to give you an honest look of how good my languages actually are, and I never edit them. It's not like every sentence has been cut and edited and pieced together. And likewise, I've also made videos titled how bad my German has gotten, how bad my Portuguese has become. And then I documented myself bringing those languages back up to scratch because this is a really honest part of the process, and it's something that I think you will inevitably experience if you're going to try to learn multiple foreign languages. And so in that same line of thinking, I think as we have more and more people sort of making these videos where they speak a bunch of languages and certainly portray themselves to be really fluent in lots of languages, I think it's crucial to have a really honest conversation about what that really entails and what are some of the pitfalls you can fall into, and again, what is the reality of learning that many languages. And so I think that the scenario you described, Trilingual Lynn, is extremely common, and it is important to note certain things like the more languages you learn at sort of a beginner level, it is much harder to maintain those. And so, as many of you will know, I typically strive to learn languages to high levels, in most cases very high levels. And so something really important to understand is that the better your language skills get, the slower they will atrophy. And I often describe this sort of language learning barrier. I have a whole video describing that barrier with a really cool boat analogy. I love boats. But there does seem to be this sort of barrier that you cross, and once you're past it, it becomes significantly easier to maintain your language skills. I've often talked about how with languages like Japanese and French, my skills atrophy very slowly. I hardly speak those languages at the moment, but I can still just turn on a video and start filming and speaking them, and I'm usually fine. But German is a language that I just still haven't really gotten past that barrier. And so my German will atrophy a lot more quickly. And so multiple times now, I have improved my German to be, I think, really quite good. But I really do notice a significantly faster drop in my skill when I don't speak German compared to languages that I speak better. Now, this effect is even greater when your skills are only at the beginner level. And so I actually had the exact same experience. There was a time when I was learning Lingala, Swahili, Arabic, I was learning Farsi. I had at least 15 languages I had studied, and at that time, probably 2 were advanced, and then maybe another 1 or 2 you could say were like intermediate. It was exhausting. And so that was when I actually decided to really dial things back. And I chose the sort of 8 major languages that I wanted to speak, which are the same 8 major languages that I claim to speak today, including English, by the way. That was 4.5 years ago when I moved to Hamburg, Germany, which, by the way, is a really fun story. And ever since then, I have been very careful about adding new languages. So the only language which I have like officially added and said, okay, I am going to strive to speak this language really well, and it's a language I'm going to be studying long term, that's Mandarin Chinese, which many of you will know I'm documenting myself learning right now. Now, here's the thing. I have dabbled with other languages during that time. I was working as a barista in my favorite coffee shop in my hometown to sort of have a side income while I was working as a translator and first getting my own business started. And one day there was a lady who came in and she was on the phone speaking a language that it sounded vaguely familiar to me, but I couldn't quite place it. I had a feeling it was Turkish, but I wasn't sure. For some reason, I just had this, it was so tantalizing hearing that sound of Turkish. So I decided that I was just gonna sort of dip my feet in Turkish. And I knew when I did it that I wasn't going to try to learn it wholeheartedly. I knew it was just gonna be a short thing, but I think it's okay to have sort of like little language flings. It's okay to just sort of get to know a language a little bit and see what it's like. But it's important to be aware that you're doing that, and it's important to do so in a way that doesn't necessarily take away from your other commitments to languages that you've chosen, that you've decided, I want to speak this language really well, and I'm studying it long term. So just to be clear at this point, I'm not saying that trying different languages is bad. I'm not saying that it's inherently bad to add new languages. I'm just saying that it is important to be aware what the long-term impact is going to be every time you add a new language and every time you try a new language but completely stop studying your other one. So what I would recommend is sort of an approach that I designed for a student of mine. I have a whole chapter in my book about the sort of 3-tier prioritization hierarchy. I think I'll do a separate video on this, but essentially you create these multiple tiers of activities you want to do based on priority. And so things at the very top, you'll do every single day. So let's say you're learning Mandarin Chinese and that is your top priority, and you have decided this is my top language, I want to learn this and speak it long term. Well, you'll do that thing every single day. However, if then you decide, you know what, I kind of want to dip my feet in Catalan. Well, what you can do is then set up a time and say, okay, I'm not gonna do it every day. I don't want Catalan to take away from my Mandarin studies, but I wanna get to know it and see what it's like, and maybe I will choose to learn it long term later. Well, you can do that just 3 times a week or every other day. The point is you can structure these activities based on priority and basically make sure that the top priority things still happen every day. And then if you have time, then you sort of go down the ladder. Now, another really important thing to mention here is that not everybody wants to learn a language to a really high level. And I think that's totally fine. For many people, the goal may just be to learn to be at a very rudimentary conversational level, to travel somewhere and maybe get by and be able to order your food in that language and have a little bit of fun and make a good impression on local people. And again, that's a perfectly respectable goal. So I think it's okay to dabble in different languages. It's okay to do some language hopping. What I want to communicate really clearly today is that it's just important for those of us who have learned lots of languages to be really honest about what that was like, what was the long-term impact on our personal lives, and what pitfalls did we run into. And so again, in my case, I was in a stage where I was so attracted to so many languages, and I ended up with like 14 or 15 languages, and a majority of those being beginner or low intermediate at best. And I had a good 6-month period where it was just so difficult for me to keep track of everything. And so I learned from that and made the decision to dial things back, and I structured my life in a way that could support learning those languages that I chose. And by the way, I should mention here that it was actually only like within 6 months to a year that I was able to bring up all those languages that I had been studying and dabbling in, but because my time was so fractured, I never really made deep progress. Back at the time when I made my first 8-language video, which to be fair, that one was more of an artistic edited piece, but that was the whole point of that video. But at that time, I will say that was really the first time when I felt like I can really feel comfortable saying that I speak all these languages. They're to different levels. Some of them are really highly advanced. Some of them are maybe like high intermediate or low advanced. But I felt really good about my level in those languages, and I had managed to create a life and a system where I was able to continue maintaining all of them and also improving them over time. And there's one final point I'll make here, which is that even for really accomplished polyglots, this is still an issue. And again, it really does depend on your goal. So I do know some people who speak a lot of languages pretty well, but they keep adding new ones. And then when I talk to them, they often tell me like, oh my God, like, honestly, I only wish I could go back and improve my French. I only wish I could just go back and enjoy reading French novels, or go and enjoy French theater or cinema again, but I can't because I'm learning Turkish now, and like I've got to learn Turkish and I need to focus on it. And again, if you're happy with that, I really do mean it, that is fine. for me, that's not what I want. For me, I've invested an enormous amount of time learning the languages that I have. And the whole point was to enjoy those for the rest of my life. Like one day, I want to dive so deeply into the world of like Latin American literature in Spanish, for example, or like Brazilian literature in Brazilian Portuguese. I would love to really explore this sort of darker world of Swedish and Nordic sort of cinema in general. Those are just a few examples. I could go on. The languages that I have right now, I'm determined, I really want to enjoy those for the rest of my life. And so I am always trying to be very aware of that. And so if I decide to learn a new language, it's usually very carefully decided. And so there are times, like I said, when I will dabble a little bit in Turkish, I'll dip my feet in Russian a little bit. I recently have been discussing with one of our commenters about this interest in Irish. But if I do that, I will do so very intentionally and mindfully, and I'll do so in a way that doesn't have a detrimental impact on my other languages and then sort of my ability to keep things under control over time. Okay, I hope that was helpful. I think this is just the first of many of these honest discussions. I would love to hear your feedback. I know that there's a really wide spectrum of people's experience that are leaving comments every day. So I'd really like to get people's thoughts on this. I'm curious to know, for those of you who have learned a number of languages, have you had similar experiences? Do you agree with my point of view? And for those of you who are just starting out or learning your first few languages, I really hope this is helpful. And again, not trying to discourage you, just trying to make you aware and help you be a bit more mindful as you go forward and learn new languages. Happy Tuesday, everybody, and I'll see you tomorrow for another Daily Language Diary.